The rain was soft that evening in Westchester County, falling like a whisper over the hedgerows and Tudor homes. The kind of rain that made everything feel quieter than it should. In the town of Ash Hollow, where children rode bikes in cul-de-sacs and neighbours shared pumpkin bread over white picket fences, the disappearance of 9-year-old Madeline Briar shattered the illusion of safety like a porcelain doll hitting pavement. She was last seen on a Thursday just after dusk. The police report would later document the sequence in sterile lines. Child was under the supervision of hired babysitter, female age 19. Babysitter reported child missing at 8:43 p.m. No signs of forced entry. Parents Dr. Carter and Evelyn Briar were attending a medical gala in Manhattan, but what the report could never capture was the look in the babysitter's eyes. Her name was Lainey Wells. In interviews, Lainey appeared calm. Too calm. Her voice barely trembled as she recounted the details of the night. "We were watching a movie. Matilda. Maddie wanted popcorn, so I went to the kitchen. I wasn't gone more than 4 minutes. When I came back, she was just gone. No signs of a break-in. No neighbours heard a scream. No cameras captured anything beyond the dark silhouette of rain pooling on the sidewalk. It took all of 24 hours for the media to swarm. Blonde, gifted, beloved. The photos of Madeline, smiling, her front teeth uneven, her head slightly tilted like a curious bird, became the face of a town's shared nightmare. But the questions began circling faster than the police could form answers. The front door was locked, the windows shut. Lainey claimed to have checked the entire house before calling 911. So how could a child disappear without a trace? Detective Joel Sutter, 17 years on the force, called it off. Something about the timeline, something about the babysitter's tone. She didn't cry, he later told investigators. She just waited, like she knew we'd be there. Lainey had been working for the Briars for 6 months. Clean record, good references, a theatre major at SUNY Purchase. But when detectives started digging, little fissures began to show. A deleted Instagram post showed Lainey in the Briars' master bathroom 3 weeks prior, lipstick smeared across her cheek like a childish dare. The caption read, "I could get used to this life." The post had been removed, but not before a classmate screenshotted it. When confronted, Lainey claimed it was a joke, nothing more. Evelyn Briar didn't laugh. She was a good babysitter, Maddie liked her, but I always had this feeling she was observing us, watching, not just caring. There was something about her, Evelyn whispered to Detective Sutter during their second interview, rubbing the corners of her sleeve until the threads unravelled. The media dug deeper, as it always does. They found that Lainey's father had been incarcerated for aggravated assault when she was 12. Her mother worked nights cleaning hotel rooms. The girl with the perfect hair and soft voice came from a past far more fractured than her resume suggested. Still no evidence, no blood, no prints, just one long strand of hair found in Madeline's bedroom, too long to be the child's, too dark to be Evelyn's. A preliminary match was inconclusive, but suspicions grew heavy. The town began to whisper. Mothers pulled their children closer. Ash Hollow had always been a place where people trusted each other, but now they looked over their shoulders, and still no sign of Madeline. The week passed, then came the letter. Unmarked envelope, no return address, delivered by hand to the Briars' mailbox at 2:17 a.m. according to the neighbour's security cam. The figure wore a hoodie, moved with deliberation, and vanished down the street. Inside the note read, "She told me something she shouldn't have. Now I can't let her go." Signed only with a symbol, a crude drawing of an eye weeping a single tear. The case turned. Theories exploded. Could this be a kidnapping for ransom, a revenge plot against the Briars? But why would someone target a child? Unless she really had seen something. Lainey was brought in again. "You sure she didn't say anything weird that night?" Sutter pressed. No talk about things she saw. Lainey hesitated. Just for a second. Her mouth opened, then closed. And when she finally spoke, her voice dropped. She said something strange. About a man she saw outside, in the backyard. She said he looked at her through the glass. But I checked. There was no one there. I thought she imagined it. The room went still. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" "I didn't think it mattered," Lainey said quietly. "I didn't want to sound like I wasn't watching her." It was too late for apologies. The police canvassed the neighbourhood again, door to door. A man seen outside a child's bedroom in Ash Hollow impossible. Unless he'd been there before. Sutter revisited the case files, dug deeper into the Briars' connections. Then something caught his eye. 6 years ago, a former patient of Dr. Carter Briar. Dismissed for erratic behaviour, filed a complaint, claim was dismissed. But the man's name had surfaced before in an unrelated stalking case that never made it to trial. His name was Garrett Niles. He once worked as a groundskeeper in Ash Hollow. Fired. Vanished. But something else Sutter circled it in red. Garrett had a daughter. A daughter who had briefly attended SUNY Purchase. A girl named Lainey Wells. Sutter stared at the page, his breath slowing. The babysitter wasn't just the babysitter. She was the daughter of a man with a motive. And maybe she wasn't as innocent as she looked. Detective Joel Sutter sat alone in his car parked just beyond the edge of Ash Hollow, staring at the low hum of a street lamp outside Lainey Wells' apartment building. Rain spattered softly on the windshield, the kind of rain that masked thoughts and blurred intentions. He watched the second-story window flicker with light. Her silhouette moved across the curtains, shadowy and slow. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the file again. Garrett Niles, a former psychiatric patient of Dr. Carter Briar. His file read like a warning no one had heeded: paranoid delusions, violent outbursts, obsessional thinking. But what chilled Sutter more than the reports was a photocopied restraining order dated 2019. Dr. Briar had filed it just after an anonymous threat was left in his office mailbox. "You think you can erase people, but your daughter won't forget me." It was unsigned. That restraining order had expired. Sutter leaned back. His instincts, dulled over years of cynicism, now screamed. If Lainey was Garrett's daughter, then this wasn't just a tragic coincidence. It was design. And yet, she hadn't run. She hadn't changed her name. She hadn't left town after the incident. She had cooperated. So what was she playing at? The next morning, Lainey sat across from Sutter in interview room 3, her long fingers clasped over each other, knuckles white. "Do you know a man named Garrett Niles?" he asked without preamble. She blinked, once then twice. "Yes," she said. There was no denial. "He's my father, but I haven't seen him in years." "How many years?" 10? Sutter slid the restraining order across the table. "He didn't reach out to you recently." Lainey looked at the paper, then away, not directly. A pause. "Explain." Lainey's voice dropped nearly inaudible. "A month ago I started getting notes, slipped under my door. At first they were incoherent. Poems, Bible verses. Then one said, 'They think you're their help, but you're his blood.' That's when I knew." "Why didn't you come forward?" "Because I thought it was a sick joke, and I didn't want the Briars to know who I was. I needed the job." Sutter narrowed his eyes. "Did your father take Maddie?" "I don't know," Lainey whispered, "but I think he wanted me to." The room went still. Then she pulled something from her coat. A crumpled note. She unfolded it with shaking hands. "You've seen what they hide. You can make them pay. Bring the girl and we begin again." Scrawled at the bottom was the symbol, an eye with a single tear. Sutter called in a forensic team. The note was bagged, catalogued, analysed. The handwriting would take days to match. But the implication was clear. Someone, possibly Garrett Niles, believed Lainey was complicit, or wanted her to be. The public still didn't know. News stations kept spinning stories about a mysterious abduction and the haunted babysitter. No arrests, no charges, but suspicion festered like rot. Then on the 9th day a breakthrough came, not from police work, but from a repairman. A lineman working on utility poles near the northern border of Ash Hollow noticed a heavy scent of rot near an abandoned hunting shed. Curious and admittedly spooked, he peeked through a cracked window and saw something that stopped him cold. A child's jacket, pink, torn. He called it in. The shed was old. Rusted chains. Rotting planks. Inside a tangle of ruined furniture and mouse nests. But beneath a false floorboard, officers uncovered what they'd been fearing and hoping to find. A mattress, a small dented music box, a peanut butter jar half filled with water. DNA confirmed Madeline Briar had been there, but she wasn't there anymore. What was left, however, was even more disturbing. Hundreds of sketches, childlike, crude, obsessive. All of Madeline, eyes too large, mouths open as if mid-scream. One showed a man holding a hand, the other hand gripped a knife. And then in the corner of the final page a name etched and re-etched until it cut the paper. Lanier. The shed was only 5 miles from where Lainey grew up. Sutter drove to her mother's house that night, a crumbling duplex on the edge of Morningside. Mrs. Wells answered the door in a faded bathrobe, her hands stained with bleach from her job. Her voice was sharp but tired. Yes, Garrett was her father. He's not been in her life. Not really. He was unstable. Lainey was always scared of him. "Did you ever hear from him recently?" Sutter asked. Mrs. Wells hesitated. 2 weeks ago, someone left a photograph in our mailbox of Lainey, standing in front of the Briars' house, taken from a distance. I didn't want to scare her. "Do you still have it?" She nodded, fetched it from the drawer. Sutter studied the photo. It was blurry, but enough to make out the figure. Lainey, standing alone on the Briar's front porch, head turned, as if someone had called her name. The timestamp printed at the bottom read 7:41 p.m, the night Maddie disappeared, and Lainey had claimed to be inside watching Matilda with the girl. Sutter returned to headquarters and pulled the 911 call. He played it again, and again. The calmness, the exact words. She was just gone, like she vanished, like someone took her. But something else? Something he'd missed the first time, a faint noise in the background. Click, click, metallic, steady. He isolated it, enhanced. It wasn't the TV. It was the sound of a latch, a deadbolt, from inside the house. Someone had locked the door, and whoever had done it was still inside the deadbolt. A mechanical click in the background of the 911 call, so subtle it could have been missed, was missed until now. But once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. The lock engaging, the metallic certainty of someone sealing the house from within. Detective Joel Sutter sat in the surveillance room of the Ash Hollow Police Department, the glow from the monitors turning his face ghostly pale. The audio technician, a wiry man with tobacco-stained fingers, leaned back from the console. It's not an echo. That was a live lock. Someone locked the front door right after she called it in. Sutter nodded slowly. Run the call again, from the top. The technician hit play. Lainey's voice calm, measured, faintly tremulous, but not the panic you'd expect from someone whose charge had vanished. 911, what's your emergency? There's a little girl missing. She was just here. She was watching a movie. I went to get her popcorn. She's gone. And then the click. The only other sound was the distant roll of thunder and the low hum of Matilda playing in the background. Sutter sat back, letting the moment sink in. If Lainey had been outside or even in the kitchen who locked that door. He checked the floor plan of the Briars' home again. The front door was within the line of sight from the living room. Maddie couldn't have wandered out without being seen, but if she had been taken, the kidnapper was already inside, or invited inside, and Lainey might have helped. But why and for who? The next morning Sutter visited the Briars again. The house felt hollow despite Evelyn's attempts to maintain a facade of normalcy. She answered the door with dark circles beneath her eyes, mascara smudged into fine lines. Carter stood behind her expressionless. We haven't heard anything new, Evelyn said, trying to maintain composure. Is this about Lainey? Sutter hesitated, yes and no. He stepped inside. The scent of lavender cleaner couldn't mask the undercurrent of fear that had saturated the place. I need to ask about the guest room, he said. You mentioned Lainey stayed over sometimes. Carter nodded, only once or twice, when we had late nights. I'd like to see it. The guest room was upstairs pristine. Nothing seemed disturbed. But something about the desk drawer drew Sutter's eye. He pulled it open. Inside a small leather-bound notebook. A diary. It belonged to Maddie. Her handwriting was uneven but full of emotion. He flipped through the entries: days of playground drama, a lost tooth, a drawing of her favourite stuffed bunny. Then 4 days before she vanished, an entry stood out. Lainey had another phone. She told someone he's almost ready. I think she was talking about Daddy. Sutter froze. He read the entry again. He's almost ready. Who was he, and what was she preparing him for? Back at the station he confronted Lainey. She was in a grey hoodie now, sleeves pulled over her hands, hunched into herself like a shell. You had a second phone, Sutter said without prelude. What happened to it? Her eyes flicked up. I lost it. A few weeks ago. Maddie wrote in her diary that she heard you talking to someone. That you said he's almost ready. Who were you talking about? Silence. Sutter leaned forward. Was it your father? Lainey's face crumpled not quite into tears but into something worse. Guilt. I didn't know he was watching the house. Not until it was too late. He was trying to prove something. He kept saying Dr. Briar ruined lives. That he had secrets. He wanted to expose him. Expose him how? He thought. He thought Maddie could make him confess. Like she'd seen something. Something Carter was hiding. Sutter felt his pulse throb. You told him that? No, she whispered. I didn't have to. He was already watching. She looked up finally, her face pale as bone. He had pictures, Detective. Not just of Maddie, of other girls. In his truck. I saw them once. And notes. Like he was tracking them. He said Carter hurt people, and this was how justice came back around. You believe him? I didn't. Not then. But now. Sutter stood. Where is he, Lainey? Where would he take her? I don't know, she said, voice cracking. But I think he's trying to make Carter confess. And until he does, he won't let Maddie go. The search moved north. Garrett Niles had once worked on a remote estate as a groundskeeper 10 miles outside of Ash Hollow, a sprawling half-burnt property abandoned after a fire in 2014. It wasn't on any current maps, but Lainey remembered it. They used to call it Black Hollow, she told Sutter. He always said it was the one place no one came back to. They drove out before dusk. The road narrowed into gravel, then into mud, then disappeared entirely. The air grew colder as trees pressed in, and then they saw it. A silhouette of a house against a dying sky sagging under its own weight, ivy strangling the windows. Sutter stepped out. His boots sank into wet moss. The front door was ajar. He raised his gun, stepped inside. It was dark, the kind of dark that felt intentional. And from somewhere deep inside, the house came the unmistakable sound. A music box, playing slowly, haltingly, the same one they'd found under the shed. He moved down the hallway, the floorboards whined underfoot. The melody grew louder. Then a voice, soft, fragile. "Please, help me." And then a second voice, a man's voice, gravel and venom. "You'll tell the truth, Carter," one way or another. Sutter's blood froze. Dr. Carter Briar was already here. Detective Sutter froze in the dim hallway of the decaying Black Hollow estate, heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum. The house smelled of mildew smoke and something else coppery metallic, the kind of scent that made the hairs on your arm stand up. The music box continued its warped lullaby from somewhere upstairs, each note cracked and breathless like the house itself was wheezing. And then, silence. Sutter crept forward. The voice he'd heard Carter Briar's had come from above, which meant he hadn't been home when Sutter had interviewed Evelyn just hours ago, which meant someone had lured him here, a trap. The stairs moaned underfoot as Sutter climbed gun-drawn flashlights slicing through shadows that twisted and clung like cobwebs. On the second floor, a long hallway stretched before him, lined with broken doors and scorched wallpaper. The house had burned, yes, but not enough to erase its secrets. Then came a muffled sob. He turned right. The door at the end of the hall was closed. The music box was inside. Sutter reached it, listened. He could hear breathing laboured, angry. Then suddenly thud, a body hitting the floor. He kicked the door open. The room was small, candlelit, and they're bound to a rotting chair shirt torn and blood at his temple. Dr. Carter Briar. Across from him, standing in shadow, was a man with wild, sunken eyes and a face ravaged by time and fury, Garrett Niles. He didn't flinch when Sutter entered. Didn't raise a weapon. He just smiled. "I was wondering when you'd come," Garrett said softly, as if welcoming an old friend. "You're late." Sutter kept his gun trained. "Get on your knees. Now." Garrett shook his head slowly. "I'm not finished yet." And then with a jerk of his hand, he pulled something from his coat. Not a gun. A tape recorder. He hit play. At first static. Then Carter's voice. Panicked, trembling. "I made a mistake. I was wrong. I should have reported him, but I didn't. I buried it. I thought it would disappear if I stayed silent." Garrett's smile widened. "Confession," he said, turning to Sutter. "The truth. I gave him a chance to say it, before the world did." Sutter's mind raced. What's he talking about? But Garrett didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back. Behind him, a door, padlocked, heavy. "She's still in there," he said. "Alive. For now." Carter groaned, barely conscious. "I told him I'd only let her out once he admitted it," Garrett whispered, eyes glazed with zeal. The thing he did. The girl he ignored. Sutter was shaking now. "What girl?" Garrett's face twitched. "My daughter." Sutter hesitated. "Lainey." "No." Garrett's voice dropped into something cold. "The first one." The name came out like a wound. "Nora." Back at the station hours later, Lainey sat staring at a grainy photograph Sutter placed in front of her. 2 girls. One clearly her. The other dark-haired, maybe 8 or 9, a faded smile barely visible. "Who is she?" he asked. Lainey's face crumbled. "My half-sister. Nora." She nodded. "I only met her twice. My dad had another family once. He said Dr. Briar failed her. She died after a treatment went wrong. But there was never an investigation. Just a closed file. He blamed Carter for everything." "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I didn't believe him," Lainey whispered. "I thought it was just another delusion, like all the others, until Maddie vanished." Sutter studied her. There was something real in her grief, but there was something else too. A shadow. "Did you help him?" "No," she said quickly. "But I should have known he'd do something. I should have warned them." Back at the Black Hollow estate, forensic teams flooded the house. Garrett had been arrested without resistance. Carter Briar was taken to the hospital, concussed, dehydrated, but alive. He refused to speak on record. But in the locked room behind the padlock, they found Madeline, alive, wrapped in a thermal blanket, malnourished, eyes wide and sunken, but very much alive. She clung to the music box as if it were the only thing tethering her to the world. When they asked her what happened, she said only one thing. "He made me listen, over and over." "What did you hear, sweetie?" the officer asked gently. She blinked. "Daddy saying sorry." But the case wasn't closed, because the tape Garrett had played in that room wasn't the full confession. When analysts reviewed the recorder back at HQ, they found something strange. The audio was stitched together. Cut and spliced from various sessions. Carter's words, "I made a mistake, I was wrong," weren't about a child. They were about a misdiagnosis from years ago. A malpractice suit settled in secret. But not Nora. Garrett had manufactured the confession. He had wanted it to be real. Sutter stared at the evidence board that night, every thread more tangled than the last. A dead girl from 10 years ago. A doctor who may have buried the truth. A father who turned grief into obsession. But the real question, the one he couldn't shake, was this. Why did Maddie tell her mother 2 weeks before she vanished that she didn't like the man who came upstairs when everyone was sleeping? Because that man wasn't Garrett. And Garrett had never set foot in the Briar home. Not until that night. Which meant there was someone else. The photo sat at the centre of the board now. Not the one of Laney, not the one of Garrett, but a child's drawing found taped inside Madeline Briar's closet door, crayon on printer paper, a house, a family, and a tall figure standing apart drawn entirely in black. No face, just eyes, 2 circles, one larger than the other, and written in red ink beneath it, "He comes upstairs when everyone's asleep." Detective Joel Sutter stared at it, his fingers pressed to his temples. The timeline didn't make sense anymore. If Garrett Niles hadn't been inside the house prior to Maddie's disappearance, who was the man in her drawing? More importantly, who had been moving through that house unnoticed? The following morning, Sutter paid another visit to the Briars. The front lawn was still scattered with windblown flyers bearing Maddie's face, though now she was back home sleeping in a hospital bed under observation. Evelyn opened the door slowly as if aged 10 years and 10 days. She looked down when she spoke. "She doesn't want to see Carter," she said. Sutter raised an eyebrow. "Has he tried?" "He sent flowers. A letter." She ripped it up. "Why?" Evelyn swallowed hard. She said, "He let the man in." Sutter froze. "What man?" "I don't know," Evelyn said. I asked her if she meant Garrett, and she shook her head. Said he didn't have a beard. Garrett had been clean-shaven. Sutter stepped inside the house once more, a place now humming with silence and tension. He walked through the living room past the kitchen and paused at the base of the stairs. "How many people have keys to this house?" he asked. Evelyn blinked. "Just me, Carter and Laney." "Not the cleaning service?" "We haven't had one in over a year." He nodded. "Anyone else ever stay overnight? Friends, family?" "No, we don't really. We're private." Sutter walked upstairs, retraced his steps. Maddie's room was still untouched, sealed for evidence processing. He looked at the hallway window, and then something clicked. He turned to Evelyn. "Have any of the windows ever been repaired?" She paused. "Yes, that one actually. A year ago." "What?" "Maddie left it unlocked one night, and we found it cracked the next morning. Carter said maybe the wood swelled and it split. We replaced it just to be safe." Sutter examined the window. The trim looked newer, but the latch was rusted, meaning it hadn't been opened in a while. Except for the faint smudge on the inside. He bent closer. Not a fingerprint, a footprint. Small, narrow, bare, as if someone had stood on the windowsill. Not a child, a man. Back at the station, Sutter requested building plans for the Briar home, every contractor who'd ever worked there, every repairman who'd logged time inside. And among the list of subcontractors, one name jumped out. Michael Dern, window repair, 2.7 hours build. No address, just a phone number, traced to a burner. Sutter dug deeper. No business license, no listed employment. But he found one match, and Michael Dern was previously a maintenance worker at St Mary's Paediatric Centre in Yonkers, terminated in 2015 after inappropriate behaviour toward minors. No charges filed, no investigation opened, and the supervising physician who dismissed him, Dr. Carter Briar. Sutter's chest tightened. Another connection. Michael Dern had once worked under Carter, had been quietly removed. And now, 8 years later, Madeline had told her mother about a man who came upstairs while they slept. A man without a beard. A man Carter let in. And the window. It had been his job to replace it. Not Garrett's. Not Laney's. Someone no one was watching. They found him 3 days later, living under an alias in a rented RV behind a gas station 30 miles north of Ash Hollow. The vehicle was barely roadworthy, stained curtains, rust along the edges, and a portable generator humming beside it. When they opened the door, the smell hit them first of body odour, gasoline and mildew. Inside were dozens of photographs taken through windows. Most recent Maddie Briar brushing her teeth. From the inside of the house. Dern had been inside. Repeatedly. One photo zoomed grainy showed Lainey asleep on the couch. Another Evelyn at her vanity. But no photos of Carter. Only notes. Scribbled across napkins, receipts, notebook pages, and the backs of photographs. He takes the clean and makes them dirty. The little one knows. She watches him. She told the girl in red. The babysitter hides what she can't accept. Sutter felt the bile rise in his throat. He stepped outside for air. When Dern was brought in, he said almost nothing. But one thing he said clearly, eyes fixed on the two-way mirror. I wasn't the only one inside that house. Back at the Briars' residence, Sutter sat across from Carter Briar, finally out of the hospital. His face was gaunt. His hand trembled as he held a glass of water. "Do you know Michael Dern?" Sutter asked. Carter didn't flinch. "I fired him years ago. He was unstable." "Why didn't you report him?" "I did, internally. There wasn't enough to press charges." Sutter stared at him, hard. "Maddie said he came upstairs, and that you let him in." Carter set down the glass. "I never saw him, not once. Not since that day I let him go." "Are you sure?" Carter's eyes flickered. He looked away. "I'm not sure of anything anymore." Sutter leaned forward. "One more question, Doctor." Carter met his gaze. "Did you know Lainey was Garrett's daughter before you hired her?" Silence. "Then yes. Why did you let her work here?" "I wanted to make peace with the past." "But the past didn't want peace, did it?" Carter didn't answer. But Sutter could see it in his face. Something still hadn't come out. Something still rotting beneath the walls of this perfect house. And he was starting to believe. Lainey knew exactly what it was. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Detective Joel Sutter sat back down with Lainey Wells this time. Not in the interrogation room, but in the soft amber light of a break room no one used. She looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, fingers trembling around a paper cup of tea she hadn't touched. He placed the folder between them. Inside photos of the RV, the Polaroids, the notes, and a single photo that made her go still. Lainey stared at it, a blurred snapshot of herself sleeping on the Briars' couch taken through the living room window. Her mouth parted slightly. She didn't speak. Michael Dern Sutter said, "You never mentioned him." "I didn't know his name," she said quietly, "but I knew someone was watching." She finally looked up at him. There were things missing. A fork, one of Maddie's stuffed animals. Once the back door was unlocked when I was sure I'd locked it. I thought I was imagining it. I didn't want to lose the job. I needed the money. My mum was... She's not doing well. Sutter leaned forward. "Why didn't you say something after Maddie disappeared?" Lainey's lip quivered. "Because part of me thought it was him. My dad. That he'd finally snapped. And if I admitted I was scared before it happened, they'd say I let it happen." Sutter opened the next photo. This time it was Maddie sitting in the upstairs hallway looking directly at the camera. A note scribbled on the back, "She sees everything." Sutter took a breath. "Lainey, I don't think this ends with Dern." She blinked. "He was inside the house, wasn't he?" He nodded. "But he never touched her. Not according to Maddie. He watched. He left signs. He wanted to be seen. But someone else. Someone let him in. Gave him access. And I think that someone wanted to make sure we looked only at Garrett Niles." Lainey stared. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Sutter said, sliding the last photo forward, someone staged Maddie's disappearance. Used Dern's obsession. Used your father's history. Used you to cover something much older. The photo was old, yellowed, a different girl. Nora!" It had been taken in a paediatric psych ward. In the background, Carter Briar Younger smiling for a staff portrait. Lainey covered her mouth. "I didn't know there was a photo of her." "There wasn't," Sutter said. "This was in Garrett's RV. Dern had it, meaning he and your father were connected long before this. We just didn't see it." Silence fell over the room, and then Lainey said something Sutter wasn't expecting. "He came to me, Carter." Sutter stilled. "When? 2 weeks before Maddie went missing. He asked me to stay late, said he was worried about her, that she was having night terrors, that she mentioned a man who wasn't real." "What did he say exactly?" Lainey's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said sometimes children invent things, and if we feed it, it grows." Sutter stared at her. "And you believed him." "I did," she whispered. "But now, I think he was trying to plant doubt, get ahead of what Maddie might say." Later that morning, Sutter returned to the hospital. Maddie was awake, frail eyes sunken, a stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. A child psychologist sat with her, but Sutter asked for a moment alone. She watched him with the caution of someone who'd learned not to trust too quickly. He sat beside her and placed a photo in her lap, the staff portrait. Her father, younger, standing beside a group of nurses and residents. "Do you know any of these people?" he asked gently. She stared, pointed to Carter. "That's Daddy." Then her finger moved to the girl beside him. "Her name was Nora. She came to my room once." Sutter's stomach dropped. "Maddie Nora isn't alive anymore." "I know," Maddie said, blinking slowly, "but she still talks to me." He stayed very still. "What does she say?" Maddie looked at the ceiling. Her voice took on a dreamlike softness. "She says Daddy did something bad. To her. That's why she's stuck. That's why I saw the man with the crooked tooth. She says he was there too. Michael Dern had a crooked tooth, a molar missing half its crown." "What else does she say?" "She says it's my turn to tell." Sutter didn't sleep that night. He drove to the St. Mary's Pediatric Centre in Yonkers. It was still there, barely half of it closed down, funding slashed half-lit corridors echoing with fluorescent buzz. He found the archived records buried in a storage wing unopened in years. Patient files, and in the bottom drawer under a single folder, Nora L. Niles. The first page was redacted, the second a treatment chart, the third an incident report, dated March 4th, 2014, filed by resident physician Carter Briar. Slight sedation error during routine evaluation. Patient became agitated, applied restraints. Resulting injury dislocated shoulder. Family not notified. Incident reviewed internally and closed. Closed, just like Garrett had said. But there was something more. A handwritten note paperclipped to the back. Patient demonstrates persistent fixation on male staff member. Staff Michael Dern advised to avoid extended interaction. Risk of attachment disorder. Sutter felt the blood drain from his face. The three names were connected in one incident. Carter, Garrett, Dern. The same hallway, the same girl. And then he saw it. A single line. Observation discontinued after patient death. Causes asphyxiation during a night episode. No criminal suspicion. No autopsy. No inquiry. No records beyond that night. And the man who signed off, Dr. Carter Briar. Sutter stood in that file room, the pages trembling in his hands. The case had never been about one man breaking in. It had always been about what happened behind closed doors, about what was buried 10 years ago, and now somehow it was repeating itself. Back at the house. Back with Maddie! And Sutter knew. Someone still wasn't finished. The storm arrived without warning that night, sheets of rain slashing across the streets of Ash Hollow, wind bending the maples until their limbs cracked. Detective Sutter drove through the darkness, tyres carving muddy tracks toward the Briar's house. He didn't use the siren, there was no time for noise, only urgency. In his passenger seat lay the file from St. Mary's Nora Niles' death. A restraint gone wrong, the quiet hush of an internal review. Michael Dern noted for emotional attachment. Carter Briar, the man who signed it all away. But it wasn't just the redacted lines. It was what Maddie said. She says it's my turn to tell. The ghost of a girl haunting another child, or a child finally breaking through the web of adult lies. And Carter, he had known everything. The house was dark. Not unusual at first glance. It was past 1 a.m, but Evelyn Briar's car was still in the driveway. Sutter killed the engine and stepped out into the wind. The rain soaked through his coat within seconds. He moved up the drive, scanning windows, the porch, the second-floor hallway. No light. He rang the bell, waited. Nothing. His hand went to the doorknob. It turned, unlocked. Sutter stepped inside. The house was silent, but the air felt thick, humming. Wrong. He called out Mrs. Briar. His voice was absorbed by the walls. No answer. He moved forward, into the kitchen, the living room. Everything was in its place immaculate, except for one thing. A faint trail of muddy footprints leading to the stairs. Bare feet. Small. Maddie. Sutter followed them. Step by step. Up the stairs. Down the hallway. They stopped outside Maddie's room. The door was cracked. Inside the room was cold. The window wide-open curtains blowing inward. The bed was empty. No child. And on the pillow another drawing. Crayon, red and black. A house, 2 stories, and in the window, a girl. Eyes wide, arms reaching. And behind her 2 figures. One tall, one crouched. A note scribbled on the back. He said, "I have to go with him, to where Nora sleeps." Sutter's breath caught. He turned and ran. Down the stairs, through the hallway. And then he stopped. Evelyn Briar stood at the base of the stairs. Her robe soaked in rain, her hands shaking. "Where is she?" Sutter asked, voice low. "I don't know, I fell asleep, I was so tired, I woke up and the window was open." Sutter pushed past her, heading toward the back door. It was ajar. And beyond it, muddy ground footprints disappearing into the woods. Evelyn followed. "He said she was sleepwalking," she sobbed. Carter said she'd started doing that again. Like when she was little. I didn't think. Sutter turned to her sharply. He said that again Maddie's never had sleepwalking episodes in her medical file. Why would he say again? Evelyn looked stunned. I don't know, maybe he... Where is he now? She hesitated. He left hours ago. Said he needed air. Sutter stared at her. And you believed him. But Evelyn was already breaking tears, spilling hands, gripping her robe like it could hold her together. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Sutter followed the trail into the woods. His flashlight swung wildly, bouncing off trees slick with rain. The footprints led into the ravine behind the neighbourhood, an area long rumoured to be off-limits since the floods years ago. But he knew the topography. It dipped, curled, then rose again to a clearing, a half-buried foundation of what used to be an old estate long gone. Just brick bones and roots now. And at the centre of it, light, a lantern flickering. And beside it, a small figure curled on the ground. Sutter ran heart-hammering. "Maddie!" She turned slowly, eyes-wide pupils dilated like saucers. "Shh," she whispered. "He's close." Who brought you here?" But before she could answer, a second light snapped on behind Sutter. Blinding, and a voice cold and steady. She was already leaving. I just helped her. Carter Briar stepped into view, flashlight in one hand. The other held something metal. A surgical bag. Sutter stepped in front of Maddie. "She's coming with me." Carter's expression didn't change. "She doesn't want to go home. Do you, sweetheart?" Maddie didn't answer. Sutter's voice turned sharp. "What are you doing out here, Carter?" Carter sighed. "This place. This is where I used to come. Long before the house. Before St. Mary's. Before Nora." He looked around the clearing like it was sacred. "She's here, you know. Nora. I've seen her. In the dreams, in Maddie's drawings. She never left. Not really." "You buried her memory," Sutter said. "No." Carter's voice cracked. "I buried the truth. Because I was scared. Because if I told them what I did, how I let Dern get close, how I let it happen." He choked on the words. "I didn't kill her, detective, but I let her die." And Maddie Sutter pressed. "Are you going to let her die too, just to make peace with a ghost?" Carter shook his head violently. "I wasn't going to hurt her. I just needed to show her where it happened, so she'd understand, so she'd stop talking about it." "She's 9, Sutter said coldly. "She didn't invent Dern. You gave him access. You knew he was watching." "I didn't know he'd come back," Carter whispered. "Not until Lainey said Maddie mentioned a man outside her window. That's when I knew. That's when I started seeing her again. Nora. She made me remember." The rain intensified, pelting down around them like a judgment. Sutter slowly reached for his radio. Carter didn't move. "She sees everything," he said. Maddie Sutter asked. "No." Carter looked past him. "Nora." And then quietly, as if to himself, she told me this would be the end. They arrested Carter that night, calm, almost relieved. He didn't resist. Maddie was wrapped in Sutter's jacket, shivering but unharmed. She didn't speak for hours, but when she finally did, she said, "He told me if I was quiet, she wouldn't come back." But she did. She stood next to him the whole time. "Who, Maddie?" "The girl with the red ribbon." "Nora." But something still didn't fit. Back at the station, Sutter sat alone with a case file flipping to the very first report. Maddie's disappearance, Lainey's call, and one detail so small it had been overlooked. The popcorn. Lainey had said she went to make popcorn, but the microwave log pulled later showed no use at all that night. She never went to the kitchen, which meant she never left Maddie alone. So the question now wasn't who took Maddie. It was, what exactly did Lainey see that night? And why did she lie about it? Morning came slow and grey in Ash Hollow, as if the sky itself was reluctant to bear witness to what the night had left behind. The news broke before sunrise. Prominent physician arrested in connection with daughter's disappearance. New links to historic patient death uncovered. The media frenzy reignited. Reporters lined the sidewalks. But inside the Ash Hollow Police Department, under the flicker of 2 white lights, Detective Joel Sutter stared across the table at Lainey Wells again. The girl who had in every visible way been cooperative. Polite, quiet, even haunted. But not truthful. He laid the final piece on the table between them. A time-stamped log from the Briar's smart kitchen system. It told the truth without judgment. Microwave not activated, stove inactive, kettle idle. Lainey didn't flinch when she saw it. "You said you went to make popcorn," Sutter said evenly. She nodded slowly. "But you didn't. You stayed in the room. So, what really happened?" Silence stretched between them like a pulled thread growing tighter. Lainey exhaled, closed her eyes, and then finally, "I lied because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to protect." Protect from what? She opened her eyes, and they were full of something far more dangerous than guilt. Fear. "I was in the living room with Maddie. We were watching Matilda. She was curled up next to me, half asleep. And then..." Sutter leaned forward. Then what? I heard footsteps upstairs. Could it have been the wind? The house settling? No. Her voice was steady. It was deliberate. I turned the TV down, listened. It was slow, measured, like someone didn't want to be heard. Sutter's chest tightened. What did you do? I told Maddie to stay put. I stood up, but I didn't go to the kitchen. I crept to the bottom of the stairs, just to check. Her breath hitched. I saw someone coming down. Who? I thought. At first it was Carter, the way he walked. But the lights were off, and he didn't speak. He just stopped on the stairwell, like he didn't expect anyone to be watching. She paused. Then Maddie called my name. Sutter said nothing. He turned his head fast toward her voice, and that's when I saw his face. A tremor ran through her. It wasn't Carter, and it wasn't my father. Sutter leaned forward. Then who was it? Laney blinked. I don't know, but he had something in his hand, not a weapon, something small, like a recorder or a pager. What happened next? I took a step back. I didn't even think I called Maddie to come to the kitchen, told her to grab her bunny. I wanted her away from the stairs, but by the time I turned around he was gone. Gone where? I don't know. Was the front door open? No, still locked. Sutter stared at her. You saw someone inside the house and you never said a word. I didn't know who to trust, she cried. The police were circling me. My dad was missing. The Briars were looking at me like I was a time bomb. And Maddie, she was scared, but she wouldn't talk. She wiped her eyes. So I made up the popcorn story, because I thought it would buy me time. I thought maybe the whole thing was a dream, or some kind of sick trick. But then Maddie was gone and She broke off. Sutter was silent for a moment. Laney? When Maddie was found, she had drawings of someone she said came upstairs when everyone was asleep. You saw that man, didn't you? Laney nodded. He's real. Then why haven't you helped us find him? She shook her head. Because I think he's still in the house. That night, Sutter returned to the Briars' residence with a forensic team. Not just to process a scene, but to take it apart. Room by room, panel by panel. The focus was on the walls now, the voids, the spaces in between. And at 2:47 a.m, behind the guest bedroom closet, they found it. A hidden passage. Cramped narrow. The sort used in old construction servant access. Never listed on the modern plans. Inside, old candy wrappers, a pair of smudged binoculars, a soiled blanket. And tucked between the floorboards, a digital recorder. The tape clicked as Sutter hit play. Static. Then, a child's breathing. Soft, panicked, and a man's voice. Calm, almost soothing. It's okay, Maddie. You won't even remember when you wake up. Sutter's stomach turned. The voice wasn't Garrett's. Not Carter's. Not Dern's. He'd heard this voice before, but not in a criminal file. He turned to the forensic lead. Get me a voice match. I don't care if it's 4 a.m, run it now. 3 hours later, Sutter stood in the parking lot of Ash Hollow Elementary, watching the staff filter into the building for a teacher-in-service day. The sun was rising soft and deceiving. He spotted the man immediately. Tan jacket, coffee in hand, warm smile, a voice that made children feel safe. Vice Principal Raymond Ellis. He had been at every fundraiser, spoken to the media, sat beside Evelyn Briar during interviews, delivered Maddie's homework during her absence as a show of support. His voice matched. Sutter approached him slowly. Mr. Ellis? He turned relaxed, friendly. Detective. Early day, huh? Sutter pulled out the recorder. Do you recognize this? Ellis's smile faded. He stared at the device. And for just a second, he forgot to breathe. The coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the pavement. The moment the coffee cup hit the pavement, time slowed. Vice Principal Raymond Ellis didn't run. He didn't scream. He just stood there, shards of ceramic at his feet, breath-fogging in the morning chill. Detective Sutter held the recorder between them like a crucifix. Where were you the night Maddie Briar disappeared? Ellis blinked. I already told the officer who interviewed me. I was at home, watching Jeopardy. My wife was there. We had dinner. Your wife filed for separation 7 months ago. She lives in Boston. A long pause. Ellis's jaw clenched. I must have misspoken. Sutter took a step closer. You're a mandated reporter. You've worked with children your entire career. Yet somehow your voice ends up on a recording calming a girl who is being hidden inside the walls of her own house. Ellis said nothing. Say something, Sutter snapped. And then Ellis smiled. But it wasn't the smile of a man caught. It was the smile of someone who had waited to be found. I didn't hurt her, he said, almost wistful. I protected her. I kept her quiet. I knew what they were doing to her detective. What her father had done before. Sutter stared at him. What do you mean? Ellis tilted his head slightly. Do you really think Maddie was the first that Carter Briar was just a negligent doctor? You think Garrett's daughter died because of an accident? He took a slow breath. I knew them both. Back then, Carter and Garrett. I was in the psychiatric program at St. Mary's, administrative rotation. Just a grad student, but I saw things. The charts. The way children were shuffled between rooms when observation got too close to harm. Sutter's fingers curled. You were in your 20s, Ellis. You let this go on. I was nobody, Ellis whispered. And when Nora died, I knew what would happen if I said anything. Carter had connections. Garrett was already unstable, so I disappeared. Got out. Became something else. Buried it. His eyes darkened. But then Maddie started drawing her. Sutter's heart jumped. She drew Nora. She said the girl in the red ribbon told her not to trust the doctor in the hall, that he had a silver voice and broken promises. She said he smiled like her father, but smelled like something rotting. He shook his head. She was slipping through the cracks. I knew where it would go. She'd vanish, just like Nora, so I intervened. You hid her, Sutter said, his voice rising. You lured her out while Lainey was distracted. You used the hidden passage. You kept her in that shed. I kept her safe, Ellis hissed. I waited for anyone to see the pattern, to ask the right questions. Sutter stared at him, fury rising. She could have died. She didn't, Ellis snapped. Because I was careful. I fed her. I kept her warm. I told her stories. I made her feel like someone was listening. Sutter pulled his cuffs. Ellis didn't resist. He was still smiling when they placed him in the cruiser. Sometimes he said just before the door closed, ghosts don't want justice. They just want someone to remember they were real. At the station, the confession was processed. Voice match confirmed. Diary notes matched to Ellis's school correspondence. Lainey's story corroborated. Maddie's testimony, though incomplete, placed him near her on multiple nights. But it wasn't clean. Ellis hadn't worked alone. Inside his storage unit rented under a fake name, detectives found files. Printed emails between Carter Briar and hospital administrators. Whistleblower reports never submitted. A USB drive. Sutter plugged it in, expecting nothing. What he saw turned his stomach. Surveillance footage, grainy, no audio. Inside St. Mary's. Young girls drugged, restrained, some crying, some motionless. And among the rotation of doctors and interns, Carter Briar. And unmistakably, Michael Dern. The same faces, over and over. And always the same pattern. Sutter sat there barely breathing. It was a system, a circle. And Ellis, distorted as he was, had tried to rupture it. Later that week, Sutter visited Evelyn Briar. She sat at her kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a cold cup of tea. Maddie was staying with her grandmother. The house was quiet again, empty. I don't know what to say, Evelyn said softly. I don't know if I ever really knew my husband. Sutter nodded. He buried a lot. Evelyn looked down, then up. She's different now, Maddie. She looks at me like I'm not really here. She's trying to decide what's real. It'll take time. Do you think she saw Nora? Sutter didn't answer, but he remembered the drawing Maddie had made just the day before. A girl in a red ribbon standing in the corner, watching. Not scary, just there. Always there. Evelyn's voice was faint. She told me she heard whispering. Even before all of this, at night. Sutter stood slowly. Sometimes when truth stays hidden too long, it finds other ways out. The trial began 6 months later. Ellis pled guilty, offered no defence. Carter Briar was indicted for suppression of abuse, obstruction of justice and negligence leading to harm. Michael Dern was found dead in jail. Apparent suicide, but no one believed it. In the final hearing, Maddie took the stand. She was 10 now, older, sharper. She looked at Carter once, then looked away. I'm not afraid anymore, she said, because Nora's not afraid either. And in that courtroom, silence fell like ash. Afterward, Lainey moved away, changed her name, started writing essays about ethics, about silence, about watching from the edge and finally stepping in. Sutter visited her once 2 years later. She lived by the sea. She handed him a sealed envelope before he left. Inside, a single page from Maddie's sketchbook. A house. A girl. And beside her, holding hands, Nora and Maddie, safe, smiling. Hall. Part 10, The Babysitter Knew Too Much. Justice didn't come swiftly. It never does in cases like this. But it came. Maddie began therapy. She learned to sleep with the lights off again. She started painting. And every painting had one thing in common. A red ribbon, somewhere, sometimes hidden, sometimes floating. Always there. Lainey found peace too, not in forgetting, but in the knowing. That she had stayed. That she had seen. That she had not looked away. And Detective Sutter. He kept the crayon drawing of Nora on his office wall. A reminder that not all ghosts wear white. Some wear ribbons, some speak through children, and some finally are heard